The howling wind carried dust across the empty streets of Redemption Creek, a once thriving mining town now barely clinging to existence in the harsh Colorado territory of 1878. Willow Hayes stood on the worn wooden porch of her father's general store, watching the last wagon disappear over the horizon, the fifth family to leave that week alone. "They're saying the mine's done for good this time," said Mrs. Peterson, clutching her shawl against the autumn chill. "We'll be gone by sundown. You ought to come with us, child." Willow shook her head, her chestnut hair dancing in the breeze. At 22, she was hardly a child anymore, though the lines of worry etching her face made her appear older. "This store is all I have left of my father." "I can't abandon it," Mrs. Peterson sighed, her weathered face a map of concern. "Stubbornness won't keep you fed when there's no one left to buy your goods," but Willow's decision was made. She'd buried her father just 3 months prior, laid to rest beside her mother, who'd succumbed to influenza years before. The store was their legacy, her responsibility now. As Mrs. Peterson shuffled away to finish packing, Willow caught sight of a lone figure on horseback approaching from the east. The rider sat tall in the saddle, his silhouette cutting a sharp line against the setting sun. It wasn't often strangers came to Redemption Creek these days, especially not with the mine closed and the town dying. The horseman drew closer, and Willow could make out more details. A black Stetson hat shadowed his face, but she could see a strong jawline covered with several days' worth of stubble. His duster coat was trail-worn, as were his leather chaps and boots. The large bay horse beneath him moved with the easy gait of an animal accustomed to covering long distances. He reined in at the hitching post outside the store, swinging down from the saddle with fluid grace that spoke of a lifetime in the saddle. When he turned toward her, Willow found herself looking into eyes the color of a summer sky. "Evening, madam," he said, touching the brim of his hat. "Might there be a room available in town?" Willow almost laughed. "You're about the only person looking to come to Redemption Creek, mister. Everyone else is leaving." His expression remained impassive. "Is that so?" Silvers played out, "the mine's closing for good." "Half the town's already gone, and the rest will follow soon enough." He nodded as if considering this information. "Well, I'm not here for silver. Name's Jack Archer. I've been hired to help with the railroad survey." He extended a gloved hand. Willow hesitated before shaking it. "Willow Hayes." "This is my store," she gestured to the building behind her, "though I don't know how much longer I'll be in business." Jack looked past her at the store's weathered sign, Hayes General Goods. His eyes returned to hers. "Your husband, the proprietor, my father was. He passed on 3 months ago." "My condolences." An awkward silence fell between them, broken only by the creak of a loose shutter in the wind. "About that room," Jack finally said. "Is there somewhere still open?" Willow nodded. "Mrs. Larson runs the boarding house down the street. She's probably packing to leave like everyone else, but I'm sure she'd appreciate the business in the meantime." "Much obliged." He tipped his hat again and turned to his horse. "Mr. Archer," Willow called after him, "if you're hungry later, I keep a pot of stew on. It's nothing fancy, but it's hot." A hint of a smile crossed his face. "I might just take you up on that, Miss Hayes." As promised, Jack returned that evening. Willow had just finished serving a meager supper to the few remaining souls in Redemption Creek who hadn't yet packed their belongings. Most were elderly folk who'd lived in the town since its founding, reluctant to start anew but with no real choice in the matter. The bell above the door jingled as Jack entered, removing his hat as he stepped inside. He'd cleaned up since their first meeting, his face freshly shaved, revealing a handsome countenance with features chiseled by sun and wind. "Something smells mighty fine," he said, approaching the counter where Willow stood ladling stew into a bowl. "Just rabbit and whatever vegetables I had on hand," she replied, sliding the bowl toward him. "But it'll fill your belly." He reached for his pocket. "What do I owe you?" Willow waved away his offer. "Consider it a welcome to Redemption Creek." "Probably the last welcome anyone will get in this town." Jack took a seat at one of the small tables near the window. The store had a modest eating area where Willow served simple meals, a service started by her mother years ago to supplement the store's income. "Mrs. Larson tells me you're staying put, Jack said between spoonfuls. Even with everyone leaving. Willow busied herself wiping down the counter. This place is all I have left. My father built it with his own hands. My mother made it a home. She glanced around at the shelves, already showing gaps where she hadn't been able to restock. I can't just walk away. It's admirable, Jack said, but not very practical. Willow bristled. Practicality isn't everything, Mr. Archer. He held up a hand in a placating gesture. I didn't mean to offend, just making an observation. The bell jingled again as the door opened, admitting Sheriff Thomas, a graying man with tired eyes and stooped shoulders. Evening, Willow, he said, then nodded to Jack. Stranger. Jack Archer, Jack replied, rising to shake the sheriff's hand. Railroad survey, the sheriff raised an eyebrow. Railroad, a bit late for that, isn't it? Town's dying. The line won't go through the town, Jack explained. It'll pass about 5 miles south. I'm mapping the terrain. Sheriff Thomas snorted. So even if we stayed, we'd still be left behind. He turned to Willow. Which reminds me of why I came. Got word from Silver Springs. They're sending a wagon for old Mrs. Holloway tomorrow. Her daughter's taking her in. That'll leave just you and old man Jenkins once the Petersons clear out tonight. Willow's heart sank. Jenkins won't leave. Says he'd rather die in his home than start over at 78. The sheriff sighed heavily. I'm heading out myself day after tomorrow. My sister's got a place in Denver. I understand, Willow said softly. You've served this town well, Sheriff. After the sheriff departed with his own bowl of stew, Jack studied Willow across the table. Will you really stay once everyone's gone? She met his gaze unflinchingly. I told you. This place is all I have. A store needs customers, Miss Hayes. Then I'll find something else to do. Maybe I'll grow vegetables and sell them to passing travelers. Maybe I'll open a way station for the stagecoach. Is there still a stagecoach that comes through here? Her shoulders slumped slightly. Not for the past month. Jack finished his stew in thoughtful silence. When he spoke again, his voice had softened. The railroad camp will be set up about 5 miles from here. Not much, but there'll be 30 men needing supplies. Might be worth staying open a bit longer at least. A small spark of hope kindled in Willow's chest. How long will you be surveying? 6 weeks, maybe 2 months. Depends on the weather. He stood, placing his empty bowl on the counter. Thank you for the meal, Miss Hayes. Best I've had in a long while. Their eyes met, and for a moment, Willow felt something stir within her, a feeling she hadn't experienced since, before her father's illness had consumed her life. Jack Archer was undeniably handsome, but there was something more, a steadiness about him that seemed rare in a world where everyone was so quick to move on. Good night, Mr. Archer, she said, breaking the moment. I hope you find what you're looking for. He paused at the door, the hint of a smile playing at his lips. You might be surprised, Miss Hayes. Sometimes a man finds things he wasn't even looking for. The door closed behind him, leaving Willow to ponder his words as she cleared away the dishes. The following days saw the final exodus of Redemption Creek's residents. The Petersons left as promised, followed by Mrs. Larson, who tearfully pressed the keys to the boarding house into Willow's hands. Maybe someone will want it someday, she said, embracing the younger woman. You're a brave soul, Willow Hayes. Sheriff Thomas departed with a promise to send word if he heard of anyone interested in a small, abandoned mining town. By week's end, only Willow and old man Jenkins remained, along with Jack Archer, who rode out each morning and returned each evening, his saddlebags filled with notes and crude maps. Each night, he would come to the store for supper, sharing tales of his travels across the Western Territories. Willow found herself looking forward to these evenings, the loneliness of her days melting away in Jack's company. Have you always been a surveyor? She asked one evening as they sat by the store's small pot-bellied stove, the autumn nights growing increasingly colder. Jack swirled the coffee in his cup. No, madam, I've been many things. Cowhand, horse trainer, scout for the army for a spell. Surveying's just the latest. A man who doesn't like to stay in one place long, Willow observed. He looked up, his blue eyes reflecting the firelight. Never found a reason to. No family, none to speak of. Parents died when I was young, raised by an uncle who wasn't particularly fond of children, left home at 15 and never looked back, Willow nodded, understanding the pain of loss all too well. My mother died when I was 16. Father and I managed, but it was never the same. And now you're alone, clinging to their memory through this store. The words should have stung, but Jack spoke them with such gentle understanding that Willow couldn't take offense. It's not just their memory, she said softly. This place was their dream. They came west with nothing, built this store from the ground up. They believed in this town, in the future here. Dreams change, Willow. Sometimes they have to. It was the first time he'd used her given name, and it sent an unexpected warmth through her. What about your dreams, Jack? Do you have any, or are you content to wander forever? He was silent for a long moment. I used to dream of land of my own, a ranch maybe, somewhere with good water and plenty of grass for horses. A rueful smile crossed his face. But dreams cost money, and I haven't been particularly successful at accumulating wealth. Neither have I, Willow admitted. The store barely broke even these last few years. With the mine failing, people had less to spend. Yet you stay. Yet I stay, she echoed. Their eyes met across the table, and something unspoken passed between them, a recognition of kindred spirits, perhaps, both stubborn in their own ways. October gave way to November, bringing the first dusting of snow to the abandoned streets of Redemption Creek. Jack's survey work continued, though he complained good-naturedly about cold fingers and the difficulty of taking accurate measurements in the worsening weather. One evening, he failed to return at his usual time. Willow found herself pacing the store, peering anxiously through the frosted windows as darkness fell. When the clock chimed 8 with still no sign of him, she wrapped herself in her heaviest shawl and lit a lantern. Old Man Jenkins intercepted her as she stepped onto the porch. "Where you headed, girl? Storm's brewing." "Jack's not back yet," she explained, pulling her shawl tighter. "He's never this late." Jenkins squinted up at the cloudy sky. "Foolishness going out in this. Man's a surveyor, probably just took shelter somewhere, or he's injured," Willow countered. "I'm just going to check the trail toward the railroad camp." Jenkins shook his head. "At least take my old mare, faster than walking." Grateful for the offer, Willow soon found herself riding along the snow-dusted trail, her lantern held high, calling Jack's name into the gathering darkness. The wind had picked up, carrying the promise of more snow, and fear tightened its grip around her heart. She had ridden perhaps 2 miles when she caught sight of something moving on the trail ahead. Squinting through the swirling snow, she recognized Jack's bay horse, riderless but still saddled. "Whoa," she called, dismounting to catch the animal's reins. "Where's your master, boy?" The horse whickered nervously, and Willow noticed blood on the saddle. Heart pounding, she secured Jenkins' mare and used the bay to backtrack, following the animal's instinct to lead her to its rider. She found Jack half a mile back, propped against a boulder, his face pale in the lantern light. Blood stained his left leg, and he clutched his rifle across his lap. "Jack," she cried, dropping to her knees beside him, his eyes fluttered open. "Willow, what in tarnation are you doing out here?" "Looking for you," she said, examining his injury. "What happened?" Horse stepped in a prairie dog hole, he grimaced. "Threw me hard, landed on a sharp rock that tore through my leg." Horse bolted. Willow unwound her shawl, tearing a strip to bind his wound. "Can you ride if I help you up?" "I'll manage," he said through gritted teeth. Together, they struggled to get him mounted. Willow climbed up behind him, one arm around his waist to steady him as they slowly made their way back to town, the snow falling more heavily with each passing minute. By the time they reached Redemption Creek, Jack was barely conscious, slumping against Willow's supporting arm. Jenkins, seeing their approach, hurried out to help despite his own frailty. "Get him to the boarding house," Willow directed. "It's closest." They half-carried, half-dragged Jack to the nearest room, where Willow hastily lit lamps and stoked a fire. The wound, when properly exposed, proved deep but clean. Willow cleaned it with whiskey from the store, then stitched it closed with needle and thread from her sewing basket, her hands steady despite her fear. Jack drifted in and out of consciousness, occasionally muttering words she couldn't understand. By the time she finished bandaging his leg, the storm had intensified into a full blizzard, the wind howling around the building's eaves like a living thing. Jenkins departed for his own home once Jack was settled, promising to check on them in the morning if the weather allowed. Willow pulled a chair to Jack's bedside, determined to watch over him through the night. As the hours passed, she studied his face in repose. The perpetual vigilance he carried was smoothed away in sleep, revealing a vulnerability she hadn't witnessed before. Without thinking, she reached out to brush a lock of dark hair from his forehead. His eyes opened at her touch, startlingly blue even in the dim light. "You saved my life," he murmured. "You'd have done the same for me." His hand found hers, his grip surprisingly strong for someone who'd lost so much blood. "Why did you stay, Willow, in this town all alone?" She didn't pull her hand away. "I told you, this place is all you have left," he finished. "But that's not true anymore, is it?" The question hung between them, laden with meaning Willow wasn't sure she was ready to acknowledge. "Rest," she said softly. "We'll talk in the morning." His eyes drifted closed, but his hand remained clasped around hers, an anchor in the storm that raged outside. The blizzard lasted 3 days, blanketing Redemption Creek in snow that drifted against abandoned buildings and transformed the empty streets into a pristine white landscape. Willow divided her time between caring for Jack, whose fever had broken on the 2nd day, and checking on old man Jenkins, who insisted he'd weathered worse in his time. By the 4th day, Jack was strong enough to sit up, though Willow forbade him from attempting to walk. "The railroad company will be wondering what happened to me," he said as Willow changed his bandage. "The railroad company will have to wait until you can ride again," she replied firmly. "Besides, no one's traveling in this snow." Jack watched her work, her fingers gentle as she examined his healing wound. "You'd have made a fine doctor," she smiled. "My mother taught me. She was the closest thing to a doctor this town had for many years. You're a lot like her, I'd wager. So my father always said." Willow secured the fresh bandage. "There, another few days and you should be able to put weight on it." Jack caught her hand as she moved to stand. "I never thanked you properly for coming after me." Their eyes met, and Willow felt that same stirring she'd experienced the first night he'd come to her store. "I couldn't very well let my only customer freeze to death, could I?" A smile tugged at his lips. "Is that all I am, a customer?" Willow hesitated, suddenly aware of how close they were, of the warmth of his hand around hers. "What else would you be, Mr. Archer?" His smile widened. "Back to Mr. Archer, is it? I thought we'd moved past formalities when you rode out into a blizzard to save me." "Jack then," she conceded, her voice barely above a whisper. "Willow," he replied, his thumb tracing circles on the back of her hand. "I've been thinking about what you asked, about my dreams, and I think they're changing." Before she could ask what he meant, a pounding at the boarding house door interrupted them. Willow pulled away, flustered, and went to answer it. Old man Jenkins stood on the porch, his ancient face creased with worry. "Riders coming," he announced. 5, maybe 6 of them." Willow frowned. "In this weather, who would don't recognize them," Jenkins cut in. "And strangers in winter rarely bring good news." Willow hurried back to Jack's room. "There are riders approaching town." Jack was already reaching for his gun belt. "Help me up." "You can't possibly help me up," he repeated, his tone leaving no room for argument. "And bring my rifle." Reluctantly, Willow supported him as he limped to the window overlooking the street. The riders were visible now, 5 men on snow-dusted horses, moving slowly through the drifts. Each man wore a heavy coat, scarves wrapped around their faces against the cold, but something about their approach set Willow's nerves on edge. "Do you recognize them?" she asked. Jack's expression had hardened. All trace of the warmth from moments ago vanished. "No, but I recognize their kind." "Gun hands by the look of them." He turned to Willow. "Is there a back way out of this building?" "Yes, through the kitchen." "Good, I want you to go to the store, lock the doors, and stay out of sight." Willow stood her ground. "I'm not leaving you here alone, not when you can barely stand." "This isn't a debate, Willow. Those men might just be passing through," she finished. "We don't know they mean harm." Jack's jaw tightened. 5 armed men don't ride into a ghost town in the dead of winter for innocent reasons. Before Willow could argue further, the riders reined in outside the boarding house. The leader, a broad-shouldered man with a red scarf covering the lower half of his face, dismounted and approached the door. "Hello, the house," he called. "We're looking for shelter from the cold." Jack moved away from the window, positioning himself against the wall where he wouldn't be visible from outside. "Don't answer," he whispered to Willow, but it was too late. Jenkins had already opened the door, his weathered voice carrying clearly, "State your business, strangers." Willow moved to the hallway, peering around the corner to see the exchange. The leader had lowered his scarf, revealing a bearded face with cold, calculating eyes. "Just looking for a place to wait out the weather," he said smoothly. "Heard there might be a town here." "Town's abandoned," Jenkins replied. "Nothing here for you." The man's eyes narrowed. "That's not strictly true, is it? We passed a general store on our way in. Smoke coming from the chimney. Someone's still here." "Just me and the girl," Jenkins said, "and we don't want trouble." The leader smiled, though it didn't reach his eyes. "No trouble, old-timer. We're just tired travelers. Might have some business to discuss with the store owner." From his position in the bedroom, Jack motioned urgently for Willow to come back. When she did, he pressed his revolver into her hands. "Go out the back, get to the store and barricade yourself in. I'll follow as soon as I can." "Jack, what's happening? Who are these men?" "I don't know for certain, but I'd bet my last dollar they're not here to buy supplies." He cupped her face with one hand, his expression grave. "Please, Willow. For once, don't be stubborn." The urgency in his voice convinced her. With a nod, she took the gun and slipped toward the kitchen, her heart hammering against her ribs. Through the back door, she dashed across the snow-covered yard, keeping to the shadows of abandoned buildings until she reached the rear entrance of the general store. Once inside, she locked the door and peered through the front windows. The riders had dismounted, 3 of them following Jenkins into the boarding house while 2 remained with the horses, stamping their feet against the cold. Willow moved quickly, loading her father's shotgun and placing it near the counter. She positioned Jack's revolver in the pocket of her apron, then retreated to the back room to wait. The minutes stretched endlessly. From her vantage point, she could see the 2 men outside growing impatient, occasionally glancing toward the boarding house as if expecting their companions to emerge. When gunfire erupted, Willow nearly jumped out of her skin. 2 shots in rapid succession, followed by a third. Then silence. Her blood ran cold. Jack, Jenkins. Had they been killed, she didn't have time to wonder. The 2 men outside drew their weapons and approached the store, peering through the windows. Willow ducked behind a shelf, clutching the shotgun. The front door rattled as someone tried the handle. "Locked," a gruff voice announced. "Break it down." Willow's mind raced. She couldn't fight 2 armed men alone. The back door she could flee, try to reach the livery where the horses were kept. But Jack and Jenkins might still be alive, needing her help. Before she could decide, the front window shattered, glass tinkling across the wooden floor. A moment later, the lock clicked and the door swung open, admitting a blast of cold air along with the 2 men. Come out, wherever you are," one called, his voice sickeningly playful. "We just want to talk, little lady." Willow remained hidden, her finger tense on the shotgun's trigger. The men moved through the store, their footsteps heavy on the floorboards. "Check the back room," the first man directed. Willow steadied her breathing. As the second man approached her hiding place, she steeled herself. When he rounded the corner, she fired. The blast caught him in the chest, sending him staggering backward with a cry of pain and surprise. Willow pumped the shotgun, preparing for the second man, but he was faster. He lunged forward, knocking the weapon from her hands and sending her sprawling. "You'll pay for that," he snarled, looming over her. Willow's hand found Jack's revolver in her apron. She pulled it free and fired upward. The man jerked, a look of shock crossing his face as crimson blossomed on his shirt front. He crumpled to the floor beside her. Shaking, Willow scrambled to her feet. The store was silent except for the moans of the man she'd hit with the shotgun, who was clutching his wounded chest. She had to get to the boarding house. Had to find Jack. Retrieving the shotgun, Willow cautiously made her way to the door, scanning the street for any sign of the other riders. Seeing none, she darted across, her boots crunching in the snow as she ran toward the boarding house. The door stood open. Inside, she found one of the riders dead in the hallway, a bullet hole centered in his forehead. Another lay sprawled at the foot of the stairs, his gun still clutched in his lifeless hand. "Jack," she called, her voice trembling. "Jenkins." A groan from the parlor drew her attention. She found Jenkins slumped in a chair, blood seeping from a wound in his shoulder. "They shot me," he wheezed. "But your cowboy, he got 2 of them. The leader ran out the back when the shooting started." "Where's Jack?" Jenkins gestured weakly toward the kitchen. "Went after him." Willow pressed a handkerchief to the old man's wound. "Hold this here, I'll be back." She followed the trail of footprints through the kitchen and out the back door. They led toward the stable behind the boarding house where Mrs. Larson had once kept a carriage and team. As she approached, Willow heard voices, Jack's tense and commanding, and another, unfamiliar and filled with contempt. "You're in no position to make demands, Archer. Look at you, can barely stand." "I can stand long enough to put a bullet between your eyes, Wade. Now drop the gun." Willow peered through a crack in the stable door. Jack was leaning heavily against a support post, his injured leg clearly paining him, but his rifle was steady in his hands. Facing him was the bearded leader, a revolver pointed at Jack's chest. "You always were too stubborn to know when you were beat," the man Wade sneered. "Should have stayed out of my business back in Laramie. Robbing a bank and shooting innocent people isn't business," Jack replied coldly. "It's murder." Willow's breath caught. Jack knew this man, had history with him. Wade laughed. "And what are you, a lawman now? Last I heard you were nothing but a drifter, taking whatever work came your way. Not so different from me when you think about it. We're nothing alike." "No. We both go where the money is. Only difference is I'm not particular about how I get it." Jack's rifle never wavered. "It's over, Wade. The snow's too deep for you to get far. Turn yourself in." "To who?" "You. In case you haven't noticed, there's no law in this ghost town." Wade's grip on his revolver tightened. "I think I'll take my chances." Willow knew what was about to happen. Without thinking, she shoved open the stable door, leveling the shotgun. "Drop your weapon," Wade spun toward her, his revolver swinging in her direction. Jack fired, the rifle shot deafening in the enclosed space. Wade staggered but didn't fall, returning fire as he dove behind a pile of hay bales. "Willow, get down," Jack shouted, dragging himself behind a wooden stall. Bullets splintered the wood around her as Willow scrambled for cover. She could hear Wade swearing, reloading his revolver. "Jack," she called, "are you hit?" "I'm fine, stay low." The stable fell silent except for the sound of labored breathing, Jack's, Willow's, and somewhere in the shadows, Wade's. "You can't win this, Wade," Jack called. "Give it up." A bitter laugh answered him. "Not a chance, but I'm taking one of you with me." Willow's eyes had adjusted to the dim light. She could make out movement behind the hay bales, Wade shifting position for a better shot. "Jack," she whispered, "on your left, behind the bales." Jack nodded, understanding. He counted down silently with his fingers, 3, 2, 1. Willow fired the shotgun high, deliberately missing but showering the hay bales with buckshot. Wade flinched, exposing himself for just a moment, long enough for Jack's rifle to find its mark. The outlaw fell backward with a cry, his revolver clattering to the dirt floor. Jack kept his rifle trained on the fallen man as Willow cautiously approached. Wade's eyes were open but unseeing, a dark stain spreading across his chest. Jack lowered his weapon, exhaling slowly. "It's over," he said softly. Willow knelt beside him, noting the fresh blood on his pant leg where his wound had reopened. "You're bleeding again. We need to get you back inside." Jack's hand covered hers, squeezing gently. "Are you all right?" She nodded, though she was trembling now that the danger had passed. "Who was he? How did you know him?" "Wade Simmons. Outlaw I helped capture a few years back in Wyoming. He escaped from prison last month, must have recognized me in town and followed the survey crew." "So you're not really a surveyor?" A tired smile crossed Jack's face. "No, madam. Deputy U.S. Marshal Jack Archer at your service, though the surveying part wasn't entirely a lie. I've been tracking Wade while helping with the railroad survey." Willow sat back on her heels, processing this revelation. "You lied to me." "I couldn't risk word getting back to him. Fewer people who knew what I was really doing, the safer everyone would be." She wanted to be angry, but relief at finding him alive overwhelmed any sense of betrayal. We should check on Jenkins. He's been shot. Together, they made their way back to the boarding house, supporting each other through the snow. Jenkins' wound proved less serious than it had appeared, and by nightfall, Willow had both men resting comfortably, Jenkins in his own cabin and Jack back in the boarding house bed. As she changed Jack's bandage again, he caught her wrist. I meant what I said before, about my dreams changing. Willow kept her eyes on her task. Because you found Wade. No, because I found you, his voice softened. I've been a wanderer all my life, Willow, never stayed anywhere long enough to put down roots, never met anyone who made me want to. She looked up then, meeting his gaze. And now? Now I'm thinking maybe it's time to stop wandering. Hope fluttered in her chest, but she tamped it down. Your work as a marshal is finished, as far as I'm concerned. I've given enough years to chasing other men's demons. His hand moved to cup her cheek. Maybe it's time I built something of my own. Here, in a ghost town, Jack's thumb brushed across her lower lip. Towns can be rebuilt, the railroad's coming, just not as close as people hoped, but 5 miles isn't so far, especially if someone established a supply station. Someone who already has a store, Willow's breath hitched. You've been thinking about this. Ever since I met a stubborn shopkeeper who wouldn't abandon her parents' dream. His smile widened. What do you say, Willow Hayes, want to rebuild this town together? Instead of answering with words, Willow leaned forward and pressed her lips to his. Jack responded immediately, his arm encircling her waist to draw her closer, deepening the kiss with a hunger that matched her own. When they finally parted, both breathless, Jack rested his forehead against hers. I'll take that as a yes. Spring came early to the Colorado Territory that year, melting the snow and revealing the fresh green shoots of new life. Redemption Creek was no longer a ghost town. The boarding house had been converted into a way station for travelers and railroad workers, while Hayes General Goods did a brisk business supplying the growing railroad camp 5 miles south. Word had spread of the new opportunity. 3 families had already moved in, drawn by Jack's promise of steady work and Willow's assurance that the town would thrive again. Old Man Jenkins had taken on the role of unofficial mayor, spinning tales of the town's past glory to anyone who would listen. On a warm May evening, Willow stood on the porch of the store, watching as Jack hammered the final shingle into place on the new roof. He moved with confidence now, his injured leg fully healed, his face tanned from days spent outdoors. Looks like you've got competition, she called up to him, gesturing toward the newly arrived carpenter setting up shop across the street. Mr. Peterson does this for a living, you know. Jack grinned, sliding down the ladder to join her. Peterson charges double what I do. You don't charge anything, Willow pointed out. Exactly. He wrapped his arms around her waist, pulling her against him. Though I do expect some form of payment, she feigned innocence. Oh, what did you have in mind, Marshal? His lips brushed her ear. Not Marshal anymore, just Jack. And I think you know exactly what I want. Willow turned in his embrace, linking her arms around his neck. I might need a reminder. Jack's kiss was tender but thorough, a promise of things to come. When he pulled away, his blue eyes were dark with desire. I've been meaning to ask you something. Yes, she murmured, still dizzy from his kiss. He reached into his pocket and withdrew a small, worn velvet box. This belonged to my mother. My uncle gave it to me before I left home, said I should save it for the right woman. He opened it, revealing a simple gold band set with a small, perfect diamond. I've carried it for 15 years, waiting. I'd like you to have it now. Tears sprang to Willow's eyes as Jack dropped to one knee, heedless of the dusty porch. Willow Hayes, would you do me the honor of becoming my wife, building this town with me, building a life together? Yes, she whispered, joy bubbling up within her. Yes, Jack Archer, I will. As he slipped the ring onto her finger, cheers erupted from across the street. Old Man Jenkins and the new families had gathered, watching the proposal with undisguised delight. Looks like we have an audience, Jack chuckled, rising to his feet. They can watch all they want, Willow replied, pulling him down for another kiss. After all, this town's story is just beginning. That night, as they lay together in what had once been her parents' bedroom above the store, Willow traced lazy patterns on Jack's bare chest. Do you ever regret it? Staying here when you could have gone anywhere after capturing Wade. Jack captured her hand, bringing it to his lips. Not for a single moment. Everyone else left, but I stayed, and I found everything I never knew I was looking for. In a dying mining town with a stubborn shopkeeper, she teased. No, he said softly, in a home, in you. As moonlight spilled through the window, bathing them in its silver glow, Willow knew with absolute certainty that she'd made the right choice in staying. And Jack, the cowboy who had stayed when everyone else left, had been exactly enough to rebuild not just the town, but her heart.